My name's Marcus, and I've been working at Nightmare Manor for 2 Halloween seasons. It's one of those professional haunted house attractions that takes over an abandoned warehouse every October. 30 rooms of scares, professional makeup, Hollywood quality special effects. We charge $25 admission and we get lines around the block on weekends. I started as a scare actor my first year, jumping out at customers in a zombie costume. This season, I was promoted to floor manager, which meant I was responsible for monitoring the entire attraction through security cameras and coordinating with actors via radio. It was the perfect job for someone studying theatre in college. Good pay, flexible hours, and experience working with professional level horror production. The only downside was room 13. Nobody wanted to work room 13. The setup was simple enough. A fake hospital room with an actor playing a deranged surgeon performing operations on mannequin patients. Standard haunted house fare. But actors assigned to room 13 never lasted more than a few shifts before quitting without explanation. Let me explain how Nightmare Manor works, because the layout is important to what happened. You see, the attraction is set up on a linear path through 30 connected rooms. Customers enter in groups of 6 to 8 and move through each room at timed intervals. Each room has a different theme: zombie apocalypse, haunted cemetery, mad scientist lab, serial killer basement, you know, that sort of thing. Most rooms have 1 or 2 actors whose job is to scare customers at predetermined moments. We use a combination of jump scares, atmospheric effects, and psychological tension to create the experience. The actors communicate with each other and with me through wireless headsets, coordinating timing and managing crowd flow. Room 13 was about halfway through the attraction, positioned between the abandoned asylum and the witch's lair room. The theme was medical horror, rusty surgical equipment, fake blood everywhere, hospital beds with partially dissected mannequins. The actor's role was to play a mad doctor who would operate on the customers, you know, chasing them around with a fake bone saw while screaming about removing the disease. Simple concept, but we couldn't keep anyone in that room for more than a week. My first indication that something was wrong with room 13 came during my second week as floor manager. I was monitoring the security cameras when I noticed the actor in room 13 wasn't following his script. The actor that night was Jake, a theatre major like me who'd been working haunted houses for 3 years. Experienced, reliable, knew how to read a crowd and adjust his performance accordingly. But on the security feed, I just watched him stand perfectly still in the corner of the room while a group of customers walked through. He didn't jump out, didn't activate any special effects, didn't even acknowledge the customers were there. He just stood motionless, staring at something off camera. I radioed him. "Jake, you've got customers in room 13. Well, where's your scare?" No response. The customers left the room looking confused. They paid $25 for scares and room 13 had given them nothing. I tried the radio again. "Jake, respond please." Still nothing. I left the control booth and walked through the attraction to room 13. I found Jake standing exactly where I seen him on camera, staring at the surgical table in the centre of the room. "Jake, are you okay?" He turned to look at me, and his expression was strange, confused, like he'd just woken up from a deep sleep. "What time is it?" he asked. "Almost 9 PM. You've been on shift for 2 hours. Jake looked around the room as if he was seeing it for the first time. There was someone else here, another doctor. He was showing me the proper surgical techniques." "Another doctor? There's no one else assigned to this room." But I saw him. He was right there at the table, explaining how to make the incisions look more realistic." I checked the security camera from the past hour. Jake had been alone in room 13 the entire time, standing motionless and staring at the surgical table. There was no sign of anyone else in the room. Jake finished his shift, but the next day he called in sick. The day after that, he quit. When I asked why, he said he didn't want to talk about it. You see, that was the pattern with room 13. Actors would start normally, then gradually become distracted and unresponsive. They'll claim to see other people in the room who weren't there, and within a few days, they'll quit without explanation. By mid-October, I've gone through 6 different actors in room 13. Word was spreading among the staff that that room was cursed or haunted for real. People were requesting specific assignments to avoid being placed there. Dave, our general manager, was getting frustrated with the staffing issues. Nightmare Manor had a reputation to maintain, and room 13 was becoming a dead zone in the middle of our attraction. "Marcus, I need you to figure out what's going on in there," he said during our daily briefing. "We're losing money every night that room doesn't perform properly." "Maybe we should just redesign it," I suggested. Change the theme, move the equipment around, start fresh.
"Do you know how much it costs to rebuild a room mid-season? The props, the special effects, the new actor training? We're talking thousands of dollars."
Dave pulled up the security footage on his laptop.
"Look at this. Every night, our actors go into room 13 and turn into zombies. Not the fun kind, the brain dead kind. They just stand there like they're watching a movie no one else can see."
That night, I decided to investigate room 13 myself. After we closed to the public, I sent the actors home and stayed behind to examine the room more carefully. Room 13 looked normal enough. Hospital bed with a mannequin patient, surgical equipment, props, fake blood splattered on the walls for atmosphere. Nothing obviously supernatural or unusual. I sat in the actor's position and tried to imagine what they might be seeing. The room was designed to look like an operating theatre from the 1950s, complete with vintage medical equipment and old-fashioned surgical lights. But that's when I noticed something odd about the mannequin on the surgical table. During the day shift, we used the standard Halloween prop, a plastic skeleton with some fake organs and blood effects, but the mannequin currently on the table looked much more realistic. The skin tone was perfect, the facial features were detailed, and the hair, it looked real. I walked over to examine it more closely. The mannequin was wearing a hospital gown that looked authentically vintage, not the cheap costume version we ordered, but actual 1950s medical clothing. The surgical incisions on the chest and torso were incredibly detailed, with realistic tissue layers and anatomically correct organ placement. I checked our inventory list. We definitely haven't ordered anything this elaborate or expensive. I reached out to touch the mannequin's arm and immediately jerked my hand back. The skin felt warm, not room temperature like plastic or rubber, but actually warm, like living tissue. I put my ear to the mannequin's chest and I heard something that made my blood run cold. A heartbeat, faint, slow, but definitely a heartbeat. I grabbed my radio and called Dave. "We need to shut down room 13 immediately. There's something seriously wrong in here."
"What kind of wrong?"
"The mannequin. I think it's real. I think it's a person." There was a long pause.
"Marcus, you're working too many hours. You're starting to sound like the actors who quit."
"Dave, this thing has a pulse. It's breathing. We need to call the police."
"I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't touch anything else."
While I waited for Dave, I kept watching the mannequin. The chest rose and fell slightly, so subtle you'll miss it unless you were looking for it. Occasionally, the fingers would twitch or the eyelids would flutter. This person was alive, but barely, heavily sedated or in some kind of coma. I started looking around the room for clues. In a cabinet behind the surgical table, I found medical supplies that definitely weren't props. Real scalpels, surgical equipment, bottles of what looked like anesthesia and other medications. Someone had been using room 13 as an actual operating room. Dave arrived and I showed him what I found. His reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of shock or concern, he looked resigned, like he'd been dreading this moment, but he knew it was coming. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. Dave sat down heavily in one of the prop chairs.
"Since we opened 2 years ago, maybe longer."
"You knew about this?"
"I suspected. The previous floor manager mentioned strange things happening in room 13, but I thought he was just getting caught up in the Halloween atmosphere. People see what they expect to see in a haunted house.
Dave walked over to the mannequin and checked its pulse,
but the equipment disappearing, the special medical supplies showing up overnight, the actors all having the same delusions. I should have investigated sooner.
Who's doing this? I asked.
I don't know, but they have access to the building, they know our schedule, and they have professional medical knowledge.
Dave started examining the surgical equipment.
Look at this setup. This isn't some psychopath playing doctor. This is an actual surgery being performed by someone who knows what they're doing.
I felt sick thinking about it. While we were running a fake haunted house upstairs, someone was using our facility to perform real operations in room 13. And the victims were still alive, being kept in a comatose state and used as props in our attraction. We have to call the police, I said.
And tell them what? That someone's been using our haunted house to perform unauthorised surgery? They'll shut us down permanently. Everyone who works here will lose their jobs.
Dave had a point. Nightmare Manor employed 40 people during the Halloween season. If we reported this and the attraction was shut down, dozens of families would lose income right before the holidays. But there was a person lying on this table who needed medical attention, possibly multiple people who'd been through room 13 over the past 2 years. Okay, what if we just move the person to a hospital anonymously? I suggested. Leave them at the emergency room entrance, let the medical professionals handle it.
And when the police investigate, they'll trace it back to us anyway. Every hospital has security cameras.
Dave was right. There was no way to help the victim without exposing what has been happening at Nightmare Manor. And that's when we heard footsteps in the hallway outside room 13. Dave and I looked at each other. The attraction was closed, all the actors had gone home, and we were supposed to be the only people in the building. The footsteps stopped right outside the door to room 13. Dave motioned for me to get behind the surgical table while he positioned himself near the door. We waited in silence for almost 5 minutes, but whoever was in the hallway didn't enter the room. Finally, Dave cracked the door open and looked out. The hallway was empty.
Maybe it was just the building settling,
he whispered. Buildings don't settle in footstep patterns, I replied. We decided to pack up and leave, but first we had to figure out what to do about this person on the surgical table. We couldn't just leave them there. We also couldn't just move them without risking their life. Dave was checking the medical equipment to see if there was any clues about the person's condition when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing room 13 in a red glow that made everything look even more sinister than usual. But the regular lighting system was completely dead.
Circuit breaker probably tripped, Dave said. I'll go check the electrical panel.
Don't leave me alone in here with... I gestured to the surgical table.
It will take 2 minutes. Keep an eye on things.
Dave left, and I was alone in room 13 with a comatose person, and increasingly strong evidence that whoever had been performing surgery might still be in the building. I kept watching the hallway through the crack in the door, expecting to see someone approaching, but the threat came from a different direction. Behind me, I heard the sound of movement on the surgical table. I turned around and saw that the person's eyes were open, not fully conscious, but aware enough to track my movement around the room. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. The person's mouth moved slightly, like they were trying to speak, but no sound came out. I moved closer to the table. "I'm going to get you help, just hold on." That's when I saw the surgical incisions more clearly. This wasn't just one operation. There were multiple sets of incisions in different stages of healing. Some looked fresh, others were weeks old. Someone had been performing repeated surgeries on this person over an extended period. The person on the table grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Their grip was weak but insistent, like they were trying to communicate something urgent. They mouthed a single word. "Others." There were others. They nodded weakly and pointed towards the cabinet where I found the real medical supplies. I opened the cabinet fully and found something I had missed before. A logbook with detailed records of multiple patients, names, dates, procedures performed, recovery status. The entries went back 2 years, with over 30 different individuals listed. Most of the entries ended with a single word: disposed. I was reading through the logbook when Dave came back.
"The main electrical panel is fine," he said. "Someone cut the power line to this specific room. Whoever's been using this place is here tonight."
"Dave, look at this." I showed him the logbook. "There's been dozens of people. This isn't just unauthorized surgery, it's systematic medical experimentation." Dave flipped through the pages, his expression growing more horrified with each entry.
"Some of these procedures, I've never heard of operations like this. Experimental brain surgery, organ transplants, genetic modification attempts."
And most of the patients are listed as disposed, which means they're probably buried somewhere on the property. The person on the surgical table was getting more agitated, trying to sit up despite the restraint. They kept pointing towards the door and mouthing words I couldn't understand. Then I heard what they were trying to warn me about: footsteps in the hallway again, but this time they were approaching room 13 with purpose. Dave and I quickly turned our flashlights off and hid behind the surgical equipment. The door to room 13 opened and someone entered carrying a medical bag and wearing surgical scrubs. In the dim emergency lighting, I could see it was a woman, maybe 50 years old, moving with confidence of someone very familiar with the room. She went directly to the surgical table and began checking the patient's vital signs. "Good evening, subject 31, she said to the person on the table. "Time for tonight's procedure." She opened her medical bag and began preparing surgical instruments, real instruments, not the props we use for the attraction. "I know you can hear me," she continued. "The paralytic agent doesn't affect consciousness, only motor function. You'll be aware of everything that happens tonight." The person on the table's eyes widened in terror, but they couldn't move or speak. "Tonight, we're going to explore the relationship between pain receptors and memory formation. I've developed a new technique for accessing deep brain structures while the patient remains conscious." I looked at Dave, who was holding his phone and appeared to be recording video. At least we'll have evidence of what was happening. The woman continued her preparation, completely unaware that she was being watched. She talked to her victim throughout the process, describing each step of the upcoming procedure in clinical detail. "The advantage of using a haunted house as a surgical suite is that no one questions the screaming," she said. "Even if you could vocalize, the customers would just think you're part of the attraction." She pulled on surgical gloves and selected a scalpel from her kit. "Previous subjects have typically lost consciousness around the 15-minute mark, but I've adjusted the anesthesia mixture to keep you aware for the full procedure. I'm curious to see how long the human mind can maintain sanity under these conditions." I couldn't watch someone being tortured to death, evidence or no evidence. I stood up behind the surgical equipment. "Stop right there!" The woman spun around, scalpel still in her hand. In the emergency lighting, I could see her face clearly for the first time. She looked like someone's grandmother, kind eyes, gentle expression, completely at odds with what she'd been saying moments before. "I'm sorry, but the attraction is closed," she said calmly. "You'll need to come back tomorrow night." "We know what you've been doing. We have evidence. It's over." The woman looked confused, like I was speaking a foreign language. "I'm not sure what you think you know," she said, "but I'm a licensed medical professional performing authorized research." Dave emerged from his hiding spot, still recording with his phone.
"Authorized by who? What medical board approved torturing people in a haunted house?"
"The subjects are volunteers," the woman replied. "They're all consented to participate in my research." "Volunteers? These people are being held against their will." "They're contributing to important medical advances, pain management, consciousness studies, the relationship between physical trauma and psychological development." This woman was completely detached from reality. In her mind, she was conducting legitimate medical research, not torturing kidnapping victims.
"We're calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. "You need to put that scalpel down and step away from the table." "I can't do that. Subject 31 is scheduled for a procedure tonight, and I have other patients waiting." "Other patients?" The woman gestured towards a door I hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind the surgical screen. "Subjects 32 through to 37 are in the recovery ward. They're all in various stages of the experimental process." Dave and I looked at each other. There were more victims. "Show us," Dave said. "I'm afraid that's not possible. The recovery ward is a sterile environment. Unauthorized personnel could introduce contamination." The woman was clearly not going to cooperate voluntarily, but she was holding a scalpel and showed no signs of recognizing that what she was doing was wrong. I decided to try a different approach. Doctor, what's your name?" "Dr. Margaret Kane. I'm a neurological surgeon specializing in consciousness research." "Dr. Kane, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here to interfere with your research, we're here to help." Dave gave me a confused look but played along. "That's right," he said. "We're research assistants assigned to your project." Dr. Kane's expression brightened. "Oh, wonderful. I've been requesting additional personnel for months. The workload is becoming quite demanding." "Why don't you show us the recovery ward?" I suggested. "We'd like to assess the current status of the subject." "Oh, of course. Follow me." Dr. Kane led us through the hidden door into a space that had been converted into a makeshift medical facility. There were 6 hospital beds, each occupied by a person in various states of unconsciousness. Some appeared to be recovering from recent surgery, others, they looked like they'd been there for weeks or months. All of them were restrained and connected to IV lines. "These are my most successful subjects," Dr. Kane explained proudly. "They've all survived multiple procedures and are providing valuable data on long-term recovery patterns." The sight of 6 people being held prisoner and used as experimental subjects was overwhelming. Some of them were awake and aware, following our movements with their eyes but unable to speak or move. Dave was still recording everything, building a case for the police. But I realised we had a more immediate problem: how to safely extract 7 victims who were all in compromised medical condition. "Dr. Kane," I said, "we need to transfer these subjects to a more advanced facility. The equipment here isn't adequate for the kind of research you're conducting." "Transfer them? But I've invested so much time in the development." "Subject 34 has been with me for 8 months. His progress has been remarkable." "Which is exactly why we need a more sophisticated monitoring. These subjects have outgrown this facility." Dr. Kane considered it. "You're right, of course, but where would we transfer them to?" "University Hospital. They have a specialised research wing. They can provide the advanced equipment and monitoring these subjects require." "And they'll allow me to continue my research?" "Oh, absolutely. In fact, they're very interested in your consciousness studies." This was all a lie, of course, but Dr. Kane was so disconnected from reality that she accepted everything I said without question. "Very well," she said, "but we'll need to prepare them for transport. Some of them are in very delicate condition." While Dr. Kane was preparing her subjects for transfer, I called 911 from the hallway. "I need the police and multiple ambulances at Nightmare Manor on Industrial Boulevard. We have 7 people who've been held against their will and subjected to unauthorized medical procedures." The dispatcher asked for more details, but I told her just to send everything they had and prepare for a mass casualty situation. Dave stayed with Dr. Kane, continuing to record and making sure she didn't harm any victims while we waited for help to arrive. The police and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes. Dr. Kane was confused when they arrested her instead of helping with the research transfer, but she didn't resist. Dr. Kane, it turned out, had been a licensed surgeon until her medical license was revoked 15 years ago for unethical research practices. She'd been operating illegally ever since, using homeless people as experimental subjects. Nightmare Manor was shut down permanently. The building was declared a crime scene, and the investigation revealed that Dr. Kane
had been using our facility for 2 years, accessing through a service entry she had keys made for. Dave and I both testified at Dr. Kane's trial. She was convicted of multiple counts of kidnapping, assault, and practicing medicine without a license. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. I finished my semester but changed my major from theatre to criminal justice. I'm planning to become a detective specialising in missing person cases. If you're working at any seasonal attraction, haunted houses, cool maze, holiday displays, pay attention to areas that seem to have staffing problems. If employees keep quitting from specific positions without explanation, there might be a reason beyond normal workplace issues. And if you notice that props or equipment in your facility, they seem more realistic than they should be, investigate immediately. Sometimes, the most horrifying discoveries are hiding in plain sight. The building that housed Nightmare Manor is still empty. The city condemned it after the investigation, and no one wants to lease a property where people were tortured and murdered. But sometimes, when I drive past it late at night, I can see lights in the window of what used to be room 13. Maybe it's just security lighting or maintenance workers. Maybe it's my imagination. Or maybe Dr. Kane wasn't working alone.